you much.
You're welcome.
So continuing on, now focusing on what are the standards that we're going to use to measure the aspects of the game that we chose. And let's start out by understanding that from our perspective, there were two standards. One standard for, and let's use a skill of reception, for example. There was an objective number. We had to determine how many reception attempts would be in system versus out of system before we were able to say that this player was efficient in serve receive. And so there's an objective number. We could say it was 50%, 60%, 70%. And those changes, those numbers will vary with, again, your team, your player, and your goals, your opponents, your schedule, the area of the country that you're in, the strength of the game overall. So what does it take to win? It may be 30% passing, 50% passing, 70% passing. So there's an objective statistic that you'll want to rely on. But yet there's also a second way to measure performance, and that is the player better today than she was yesterday? So if you've, for example, decided that in your league, in your area, your players need to receive serve at a 60% efficiency rate, or 6 out of 10 balls are in system, and that's what you need to win. You could have a player or a group of players who are passing 30%. Well, you may take a look at that and say, okay, well, they're not yet proficient in the skill. But it's also important to understand that you're going to measure that player against her yesterday's self, if you will, or what she was doing last month. So you have two measures of success. One measure is the player proficient, by which we mean, is the player reaching our objective statistical performance number? And second, even if she's not, is she getting better over time? Is she better than she was last week? Is she showing improved performance over the week before, the month before, the year before? And we'll discuss that concept a little bit later when we get into player motivation. But so revisiting the topic of what standards are we measuring. So the first, and I'll give a lot of data, and these numbers may be right for you, but they may not be. So in the first ball kill phase of the game, our standard was overall, we wanted our players to be getting a first ball kill at 53% of the time. So 53.5% of the time was the number that we thought was necessary in order to have a reasonable chance of winning the game. So that's the first ball kill. So slightly over 5 out of 10 swings we expected to result in a first ball kill. We then looked at that by quality of pass as well. So if the pass was in system, if we received the ball well in system, we expected to get a first ball kill just under 60% of the time. That was our performance metric. And we measured a player's offensive proficiency, if you will, by whether she was hitting that standard or close to it or below it. When the play was out of system, when we received out of system, we still had a metric, which was we expected the players on that play or those plays to be getting a first ball kill at a rate of 46% of the time. So a little above and a little below, depending on whether we had an in-system or a service reception. So those were the numbers that we used, and those were when we measured players in practice day after day and week after week. We keep, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, we kept logs on the players and provided stats reports for each player. And we were able to measure that player's proficiency or not with first ball kill. Of course, as coaches, we were doing more than that. We then asked ourselves, well, why? And that was a process. We were watching the player play. We were looking at whether she was performing consistent with our teaching keys, what the quality of the approach looked like, whether she was seeing the court well, whether her approach was technically sound. So we, of course, had our traditional coaches' tools for improving performance or looking at why we were performing a certain way. But the data allowed us to determine whether a player was sufficiently proficient at that skill or not. And then we, of course, would use that to determine, when we designed practice, does this player need more training in this skill or less training in this skill based on her proficiency level. That was first ball kills. One of the things that was obvious to us after some time, which is first ball kill is heavily influenced by serve receive. So the quality of service reception often drove whether the player or that pair was going to get a first ball kill. So the next thing we looked at was service reception, and we measured thousands and tens of thousands and through this year, hundreds of thousands of serve receive passes, and we measured all of them and provided the players with the data. And what we found was we needed serve receive passing to be at least 60% in system. Again, to be able to run an offense that was capable of winning against the players that we were playing in on the schedule that we had. And I think at this time it's important to understand the context. I'm talking about U.S. women's college beach volleyball right now. So this is not juniors, it's not high school level, and it's also not professional level on any of the international tours. I suspect those numbers would be much different there. But these numbers are culled from approximately 6 years of women's collegiate beach volleyball. So now we had a metric for first ball kill in system and out of system, and overall we had a metric for serve receive passing, and we continue to monitor players and measure their performance against those standards. But again, the coach has at least